You know, I think everyone out there knows that I am no fan of any politician, nor am I a fan of either political party. But today, I want to talk about how the DNC, the Democratic Party, is dead to me and lost for at least a generation. They have gone all in on their anti-gun, unconstitutional crap, and no one can defend them anymore. Hey everybody, Yankee here. As I was saying just a moment ago, I think most people know I'm no fan of either political party or any politician really. But it seems like if you say anything negative about one side, people think you're automatically defending the other. That if you say Republicans are corrupt, then you're saying Democrats aren't, and vice versa. And that's just not true. You can criticize one side without supporting the other. And tonight what I want to talk about is the Democratic Party and how they have doubled down, if not tripled down, on their anti-gun BS, and how, as far as I'm concerned, they are a lost cause. They are not salvageable, at least not for a generation. No one can really defend them, as I was saying before, because they have just gone all out on their anti-gun stuff. You know, recently they had a lot of losses that they weren't expecting because they thought, there's no way Donald Trump will win again. And they found out that people were okay with Donald Trump more than they were with a lot of their positions. And they just can't figure it out why that is. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is some of the extreme transgender stuff, like, well, that guy should be able to compete with women because he considers himself a girl. Well, if he's got a penis and testicles, he's not a girl. He can live his life as one, I don't care, but he doesn't get to harm other women by pushing them out of their sport simply because he wants to finish higher than 58th place for once in his life. He wants to become number one at something. That's not okay. And people in the middle are saying, we don't embrace that. But another thing that a lot of people don't embrace is their anti-gun policies. And, you know, a lot of people try to defend them and go like, oh, they're really just trying to do what's right. They're really just trying to stop crime. They're really just trying to do this. And it's never as bad as it's portrayed. You know, what they're trying to do isn't as bad as people say. Well, recently, with Bloomberg, etc., that ain't been true. What they're trying to do is disarm an entire generation. Disarm all coming generations. And they're being pretty successful at it. But a lot of people, especially voting age people, have seen through that crap and don't want anything to do with it. So what do? Instead of saying, well, you know what, we could broaden our base if we said, you know, people should be able to live whatever life they want to live, but they don't get to infringe upon other people's rights. They don't get to compete in girls' sports. I think it's okay to ask someone to say, hey, we're perfectly accepting of you, and whatever you want to do, you live your life. We'll call you whatever you want to be called, but you don't get to steal races from women, especially if you still got your dingleberries. That's not extreme. If Democrats start doing that, they'd win a lot more people over. And if they start saying, hey, crime isn't about guns. It isn't guns out there killing people. It isn't guns out there committing, mass robberies. It isn't guns committing crimes. It's people. And we need to start dealing with the people and the reasons they do these things. If they just did that, you know how much of the middle they'd win over? A lot. Just like how the Republicans, if they got rid of some of the religious crap, could win over a lot more of the middle. But they don't want to. The Democrats don't want to either. Because if either party suddenly got 60% of the people on their side, well, they wouldn't be able to keep everybody divided. You know, they'd have 60% of the people that were always winning, and the people in the 40% would be like, there's not much we're going to be able to do. Maybe we should talk with the people in the 60% and see if we can work something out. And then they'd all be talking to each other and be like, oh, you mean these aren't the people that are hurting us? It's really these people in power and these billionaires that are hurting us? And you really don't want to do this? You want to do that? Oh, well, I was told this, I was told that. And they don't want that. They don't want people talking. It's like if you take 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans and lock them in a room, well, you don't want them talking to each other. You want to keep them divided so that they stay on opposite sides of the room. Because if they start talking, they'll be like, well, I didn't lock us in this room. Did you lock us in this room? Well, you didn't lock us in this room. Who locked us in this room? Who's the bad guy here? And that would unite them, and you don't want that. So instead of doing anything that would try to broaden their base, what they do, they doubled down on their divisive topics. I don't know if they could go any more extreme on some of the transgender topics, but they did one thing that is unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. They hired David Hogg to be part of the Democratic National Convention. What are his qualifications to do anything? I mean, other than look like a human lollipop with that giant head. And he's not a kid anymore. You can make fun of him now if you want to. But like I said, what are his qualifications to do anything? Other than that he has been anointed by Bloomberg as an anti-gun hero. He was someone that was somewhere near someone got shot and took his moment of fame and tried to turn it into a career. Has no official knowledge, no learning, no experience, no professional credentials for anything to do with guns. But he's been hired to the Democratic National Convention. And even a lot of Democrats said, well, this is bad because he goes out there and he says some pretty lefty stuff, and now he's representing the DNC. Well, I think the days of trying to pretend that the DNC is not to the far left are over. And the very fact that he is on the DNC board now shows that they're all in with the Bloomberg and the anti-gun stuff. This guy is not qualified to be there. He's there for one reason, to double down with the newer generation on the anti-gun stuff to try to disarm a generation. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Republicans are trying to stop them from disarming you, because they all want the same thing in the long run. I don't want to hear about whataboutism. You know, if I say, oh, the Democrats are trying to take this constitutional right away, I can talk about that. And you can't say, well, the Democrats are doing that, but what about the Republicans? They're trying to take away freedom of the press and your First Amendment rights. Well, that's a different topic. If you want to talk about that topic, we'll talk about that topic. Come to my live chats. We do them every night at 6 p.m. Come, we'll talk about that. But that's not what I'm talking about today. So no whataboutism. The Democrats are trying to take people's Second Amendment rights away. It's part of their platform. And hiring David Hogg, who is Bloomberg Jr., only maybe weirder looking, that's a pure example of that. That is an announcement to the heavens of that. That is doubling, tripling down on the anti-gun stuff. So as far as I'm concerned, when they saw their problem and they said, we can either try to broaden our base or we can double down on this, and they chose to hire David Hogg, that showed me what they're about. And they're not really the Democratic Party anymore. What do they stand for? And no, don't give me well, what do the Republicans stand for? They're just, like I said, no whataboutism. Just deal with what I'm talking about right now. And that is how the Democrats are wildly anti-gun now, and they're not even trying to hide it, and they're hiring unqualified people to lead their party just so that they can keep these rabid little anti-gun youngsters on their side. Because they know that's about the only thing they can keep hold of right now with a lot of their policies. And no, I'm not saying the Republican Party is stronger. There's not even really a Republican Party anymore. There's evangelicals and there's Trump followers, Trump people. That's all there is. It's the Trump Populist Party, and the evangelicals have banded together on this side. On the other side, it's just the Bloomberg Party. It's the anti-gun, anti-Constitution Party. And I'm not saying the Republicans aren't anti-Constitution, because like I said, they're all out for the same thing in the long run. They just use different rhetoric to keep you from figuring out what they're about, to keep you divided. But as far as I'm concerned, them hiring that little piece of toe jam, David Hogg, to be a part of the Democratic National Convention or committee, whatever, Democratic National Committee, that shows what they are. And if you're someone who's in the middle, that you try to defend them in any way, you can't do that anymore without looking like an idiot. Because I think that move right there shows you where they stand. You cannot be pro-gun and support the Democratic Party. You can't be pro-Second Amendment. Let's just say that. You can be pro-gun, like I believe certain people should have guns and we should have certain restrictions. Well, that's pro-gun, not pro-Constitution, not pro-Second Amendment. So you can be pro-gun and be Democrat, but if you are pro-Second Amendment, you cannot be a Democrat. Period. I am not saying you can be a Republican if you're pro anything else, like if you're pro-freedom of the press, etc., well, then maybe you can't be a Republican either. Which is why we need more parties. We need more options, because when you only have two, you're always going to be choosing between the lesser of two evils. And let me tell you, the lesser of two evils is still evil. And that's not the choice you want to have. So let that sink in. Understand, Democrats are dead to any person who believes in the Second Amendment. The Republicans might be dead to you for the different reasons, but for right now, that's something people have to start accepting.